From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
This is the 15th year the Library of Congress is hosting this wonderful event. This is where authors are treated like rock stars, rightly so. I love coming back every year. This is actually my 7th year introducing an author. My first time in the teen pavilion, though, so glad to be here. My kids are still young. They're almost there because the eye rolling has begun in my house. So I think that means it's coming, right, parents? Am I right? But I am happy to be here. I want to remind everyone before we get started that this program is being recorded for the Library of Congress, so just a quick reminder before we get started. This year, I am delighted to introduce a local favorite who has fans around the world. If there ever was a rock star author, David Baldacci would be that author. Now, David has the Midas touch. Whatever he writes turns into an instant bestseller, and you know he writes a lot. I don't know how he does it, and all the books turn out to be really good. He has, in fact, published 30 novels, all of which have become national and international bestsellers. His first novel, Absolute Power, was developed into a movie starring Clint Eastwood. He also directed that movie. Several of his other works have been adapted for film and television as well. David is a lifelong Virginian, if you didn't know that. He lives in the Washington, D.C. area, so you can imagine he has plenty of juicy book ideas right outside of his door. Like every other person in Washington, maybe every other person, he was once a lawyer. But unlike many, he is a dedicated advocate for literacy and reading. He and his wife founded the Wish You Well Foundation to develop and expand literacy and educational programs throughout the country. In 2008, his foundation collaborated with Feeding America to establish Feeding Body and Mind. This is a program which distributes books through food banks in an effort to really connect and address the problems of literacy and poverty and hunger, all very important causes, important to his heart as well. That program has distributed more than 1 million new and gently used books through food banks to families in need. So ladies and gentlemen, today David Baldacci is going to talk about The Finisher, a thrilling book for young readers. Please give him a big welcome.
Hi, everybody. Everybody doing okay? Having a good time at the National Book Festival? Good. I'm going to do something today I've never done before. I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation. I have a clicker here. This could go really, really ugly. I don't know, but if it does, you're here, so feel free to laugh. When I told my kids are both grown, I told them I was doing a PowerPoint presentation. My daughter looked at me and said, "Oh my God, you're so screwed." Because it's like when anything goes wrong, like at my computer or my phone, I call either one of them. You know, I can't do something. What's this emoji thing? Is that like a country? What is that? And but then you tell me. So here we go. It's great to be back at the National Book Festival. I think I came to the second one, and I came to like 7 in a row as a writer, and then I told the Library of Congress, please don't invite me, let other writers come, and it's just been a wonderful experience. And let me tell you, I've been to lots of places around the country, and there are very few communities that have festivals like this. So please cherish it, support it every year. Once you start taking things like this for granted, they tend to go away. So support them, and you'll be able to come back to a wonderful experience every year. The Keeper is the second book in the Vega Jane series. The first one was, here we go, okay. The Finisher. Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, thanks a lot for coming, and because I really want to go out on a high note. Now, a lot of people know me from my thrillers. My very first book was mentioned in the introduction was Absolute Power. And that was made in, this is easy, what are my kids talking about? And that was made into a movie with Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman, and I went to see some of the filming. It was very exciting seeing something you've written filmed on the screen. And that's actually the movie poster, and Clint and some of the actors signed a screenplay for me, which is very exciting. A lot of my books followed since then. I've had, yeah, that's the first mess up. There we go. There we go. I think probably 31 adult books and 3 or 4 books for younger audiences have followed. And a lot of people, a lot of notoriety followed from that too. And you get to go on a lot of cool things and a lot of neat things happen to you. But, and I've even gotten to meet, presidents, 4 of them, in fact. I'd like to point out 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. I'm totally nonpartisan when it comes to books and reading. Everybody should read, regardless of what your political affiliation is. Actually, if you come to my office in Reston, Virginia, in my lobby, I have sort of fan letters from presidents. And the Republicans are on the right side, and the Democrats are on the left side, and everybody's very happy with that arrangement. So it's really, really good. I guess people think that when you're a best-selling novelist that your life is really cool and you could do a lot of great things, and you do actually, but your life isn't that cool. And when I would come home from an event and I would be telling my wife about it, how exciting it was, and she was like, yeah, you know what, it's trash night, get on it. So when people ask me what is it like to be a best-selling novelist, I tell them a story about my kids when they were little. And my daughter was maybe 5, and she's much older now. She was 5. I took her to a book signing for the very first time. We walked into this bookstore, and the lady who ran the bookstore came over and greeted us, and she asked my daughter, do you know why all these people are here? And my daughter said, yes, I do know. And why are they here? They want my dad to sign their book. Why do they want your dad to sign their book? Because my dad has the nicest handwriting. She's graduated from college now, and I still think she believes that, actually, When my son was 3, I think I took him to a bookstore for the first time. We walked in. My kid's sort of very entrepreneurial. He's in college now, too. But we walked in, and he saw all the people and all the books, and his eyes got huge. All of a sudden, my kid started running across the bookstore at the top of his speed, screaming at the top of his lungs, my dad will sign any book you got for $2. Doesn't matter who wrote it. And I'll collect the money, okay? So that's what it's like to be a #1 best-selling novelist, You'll be happy to know that the book signing later at 4:30, because at the National Books Festival, and I really like the Library of Congress, I've waived my $2 signing fee, and I'll sign my books for free. Now, I was a voracious reader growing up. This is not actually me. They hired a really sort of weird-looking kid, and because they couldn't find any pictures of me that really worked for this, and I'm just going to move on from there. Anyway, now, like a lot of kids, I loved mysteries and fantasy. I grew up on the Sherlock Holmes stories and Agatha Christie, but the very first book I ever remember reading was The Magic Squirrel. Was it up there when I was 6 in first grade? I remember being totally enthralled by that. I lost myself in this world that the writer had created, especially for me. And I was so enthralled that years later, I was grown, I found that book online, bought a first edition, and now have that in my personal library because that book had such a profound impact on me. It's hard to think that something, little printed symbols on a page bound between end papers can have that much of an impact on you, but boy, it can. And it did for me. In fact, if I weren't a reader growing up, I certainly would not be a writer today. I think reading is what really led me into wanting to be a writer. I went to the library every day, and we went to the public library every weekend and checked out more books than you're supposed to, because I had secret deals with all the librarians, and because they knew that I would read them all, and I would be back for more. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and never really left there growing up, but I saw the world through books, and I think if more people read books, what a far better world we would have in many different respects. Now, when my mom was younger and I was younger, as a little boy, I was called the Austin Avenue lawyer because I grew up on Austin Avenue, and I was called the lawyer because I'd never stopped talking, and I argued with everybody about everything. And people said, that boy is going to grow up to be a lawyer. I did grow up to be a lawyer. And so I would just nonstop talk. So one day my mom went out and bought a blank page book, and she said, honey, a lot of these stories and things you've been talking about, why don't you try writing some of them down? And I thought, I'd never thought about doing that. So I took the journal, and I had my pen and pencil, and I started writing. It was like, boom, this epiphany went off in my head. I was like, my God, this is like the coolest thing ever. I can take my imagination and I put it down on a piece of paper. This is great. And years later, many years later, I went back to my mom and I said, Mom, what a gift you gave me with that journal. You really started my whole world on that going. And she said, honey, I'm really glad it's worked out for you, but quite frankly, I just wanted to shut you up. That's my mom. She said, I love you, I'm your mother, but even moms need a little peace and quiet. Okay, you know what I'm saying? I said, yes, I know what you're saying. So I started writing, and I wanted to be published, and I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote through high school and college and law school. That's me under there, just my hand, and literally buried under paper. I also wrote I worked my way through college. I went to Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, and worked my way through college at various enterprises. I was like a master filter queen vacuum salesman. You think the Dysons are like cutting edge? I was selling filter queens in the early 80s. We had no bag. It was all centrifugal force. It was like the coolest thing. One of the things I did when I sold vacuum cleaners, if they had like a Hoover, and I would say, bring your Hoover out. So I'd hook the hoses together and I'd suck the bag right out of the Hoover. I sold so many filter queens that the guys wanted me not to go back to college and to continue to sell filter queen vacuum cleaners. So another thing I did, I was a security guard. That's when I was really ripped. Anyway, again, I think an actor was hired for that. I was a Pinkerton security guard. And when you're a Pinkerton security guard, a couple of things happen. One, you're like interview at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and after intensive, arduous training, you're out on assignment at 7 o'clock that night. I remember the guy asking me, so do you want to be packing heat? I was like, excuse me? You want to carry a gun? I was like, no, don't want to carry a gun. Why don't you want to carry a gun? Because if I'm confronted by guys who have guns and I have a gun, they're far more likely to shoot me. He's like, I don't get that logic. Well, I do. And by the way, for $6 an hour, I'm not doing anything really except maybe reading my book in the guard shack. So one summer I read In Cold Blood in the guard shack at this huge GE power plant that anything you touched on the guard rounds would kill you. The guard would take me around, and you got to put your key thing here, they have key things so they know that you make your rounds. So anything, he said, oh, yeah, you touch this, it'll kill you. If you go in here and this is dripping, you're dead. And one guy told me, yeah, if you go in there and you see this dripping, you're dead, but make sure you make your way back down to the guard shack so you can open the gates for the fire department. Because the last guy didn't make it down, they had to ram the gates, cost Pinkerton a lot of money, and I'm thinking, I'm never going in that room. So I read In Cold Blood instead by Truman Capote, which was just a fantastic book. So, and I got rejected over and over. I could paper this room with the rejections that I got for stories. Back then, I was a short story writer. I was a huge Raymond Carver fan, Eudora Welty. I just wanted to be a short story writer, and I would send those out to lots of different publications around the country and got this result, rejections, back over and over. But I have to tell you, rejections, if you love the craft of writing, rejections run into something that's wrapped around you. It's like that love transfers into Kevlar body armor. And the rejection hits you, it's going to sting a little bit. It will, but it's not going to kill you. If you don't love to write, you got no body armor around you. And that first rejection, it could be a really cruel rejection, or something very positive, like one I got one time that says, we'd love to publish this, but we only publish talent. Now, if you don't have the body armor around you, now that's going to not just sting you, it's going to kill you. And you're going to go, I'm not going to do this writing thing anymore, and you're just going to walk away from it. But I never did. After rejection, I wrote, I tried to get better. And the importance of revision and editing. How many people here get marks on their essays or stuff that they write? Everybody, right? For those of you not raising your hand, you're lying, but that's okay. So this is a typical, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. Okay, and this is a typical manuscript page where you got comments from editors. And that's a recent book that I wrote, and it's a collaboration. Yes, I write the book, but not every word you write is set in stone. People who are trying to help you make the book better, you may not like their change, you may ultimately reject your change, but I would tell you, any writer, aspiring writer, listen to people who are trying to help you make the book better. And they also may make a comment that will, allow you to think of something else in the book they may not have even thought of that you need to fix. That happens to me all the time. So editing is a very important process, and having a good editor can be a fantastic relationship. It certainly has been for me. Well, after 12 or 13 years of nothing but rejection, I finally sold my first book. And I was labeled an overnight success, you know, and lots of television shows and lots of notoriety and all that. And it wasn't an overnight success. Well, it was in some respects. It just took me 6,000 nights to get there, and then I was an overnight success. But it's that's the way it is with a craft like writing. You're never going to master it. You're always going to be just an apprentice, really. And I think that the first day you think that you've mastered writing is the day you've lost your edge as a writer, and you're actually going to get worse, not better. It's just that's sort of a craft that it is. Now, after publishing so many thrillers and having written so many books that have been bestsellers around the world, and they have definitely added up over the years, why switch gears into fantasy and the finisher? I love writing adult thrillers, so I'm working on one now. I have a new one coming out in the fall called The Guilty. But as a writer, I wanted to challenge myself. I think in most professions, think about it, you get better by doing sort of the same thing over and over again and sort of getting all the errors out of the process. You know, I fly a lot. I would never want to be on a plane with a pilot sitting in the cockpit going, you know what, I've flown this sucker the same way for 25 years. Today, we're going to try something different. I wouldn't want to be on that plane. But as a writer, if you don't stretch yourself, you sort of wither on the vine. If you don't challenge yourself to do something different, then all of a sudden you're sort of going to lapse into like this horror story of formulaic writing. And you're going to ask yourself the question, how did I do it last time? You know, and you kind of write the same template and you just change the names of the characters. I never want to get to that. So even with my adult thrillers, I throw out new challenges. I have a lot of different series where I have to create brand new characters. They're in lots of different locations, so I have to go and learn about those places. And they have a lot of different occupations, so I have to learn about that too, just to keep myself fresh. But the finisher, writing it, allowed me really to stretch my imagination. Now, when I finished writing the book, it took me 5 years. It was 4.5 years of like sweat and agony, and then 6 months of an epiphany when the book sort of was written and produced. But it really allowed me to almost become childlike again in my imagination. With my adult thrillers, I have to tether myself to the real world. In writing the finisher, I could create everything. And that's who I really am. I'm kind of a geek, a fantasy geek, but you know what? It's okay to be a geek. And I turned out all right. But the finisher started when my wife gave me a journal for Christmas, like my mom had many, many years ago. She gave me a blank journal. And I will put this warning out. For those of you who have writers who are friends, spouses, significant others, don't give them blank paper on a major holiday, because you'll never see them again, you know? So I took the journal and I was like, phew, gone. I was like the Roadrunner. Phew, it just evaporated. And I went to my study at the house and I wrote down a name. The first name that popped in my head in 2008 on Christmas Day was Vega Jane. I wrote that name down, and then that's all I had for like 4.5 years. I could not make the story work in my head. And for me, it's really important to make the story work in my head. And that's how it will sort of crystallize and then come out on the paper. And then during a 6-month period, after having worked on this and in my head for 4.5 years, I wrote, you know, a 500-page novel in about 6 months. And no one knew I was writing it, not even my agent. The only one who was reading the novel was my wife. And I knew I was onto something because when I kept giving her pages, she would read them immediately and say, I want more. She's never done that before with any of my other books. But with this one, she was very excited. Now, when I sent the book out to publishers, I sent it out under a pseudonym. I didn't want anybody to buy this book just because my name was associated with it and they thought it would sell a lot of copies because of that. So I used the name, I just blanked on the name. And so the last name was Pope, Janus Pope. And Janus is the Roman two-faced god. And I was being very deceptive, I thought. And Pope is just, you know, that Catholic thing. Sometimes it's just as simple as that. So, and Scholastic bought it, and when Scholastic bought it, they thought I was a Brit, the way the book is written. So they wanted me to come over to England to meet with them. My agent said he'd be glad to meet with you. He lives a lot closer. So when I walked into New York and said, "Here I am," it was kind of surprising for Scholastic. You know, I think Clifford the Big Red Dog like barked or something. It was amazing. First time ever, he's in the lobby, he barked. It was like, cool, okay, we're onto the right thing here. Well, that was a story really that came out of nowhere for me, but Vega Jane, briefly, is a young woman growing up in a place called Wormwood. It's a small village. There's not much to it. And they've always been told there's nothing else. Around Wormwood is the quag, and the quag is impenetrable, it's filled with danger and all that, so you don't want to go past the quag. And even if you did, there's nothing past the quag, so there's no bother, no reason to do that. It's kind of like us being on planet Earth, and there's nothing else out there. We've been told there's nothing, so why bother going? We can go to the moon, yeah, come back, it's okay. But it's sort of just Vega Jane finally learns that all that was a lie. There is something beyond the quag, so she wants to learn what it is. So the first book, The Finisher, is her escaping from Wormwood. The second book, The Keeper, is her making her way through the quag. And I really, I threw everything at her in this book. It was absolutely amazing. And it's, that was the journal entry for 2008. As you can see, I'm really far behind on the slides. I knew this was going to happen. That's some models they did for the cover of The Finisher. But I got to create an entire world. And see, there's some of the illustrations that are in the British edition of The Keeper that'll be out around the same time. And I got to create everything: monsters, Jabbits, Freks, Amaroks, an entire world. One, Wormwood, and secondly, the quag. Most fantasy series, you sort of see the entire world in the first book. This one is not like that. You see everything that's in Wormwood in the first book, in the quag, and this is in the second book. In the third book I'm working on now, an entirely new world that I have to create, which is kind of cool for me. I just really have enjoyed that. And I got to do different research. That's me in a tank. That's what I drive. The gas mileage sucks, by the way, but no. I was down at Fort Benning. I do a lot of research for my adult thrillers. I went to Ranger School, kind of, at Fort Benning, and spent 3 days down in Georgia getting my butt kicked from one end of the base to the other. It was quite intimidating, but it was important for me, the book that I was working on. But it was different research for the fantasy, and even though it was still a lot of imagination, I did a lot of research on religion and mythology and history, and it was really cool. I loved it. Now, I also got to write about my favorite character, a strong female heroine. In none of my books have I ever written about a damsel in distress, for one very simple reason. I don't know any. I only like to write what I know, Sure, I've got a lot of guy friends who need help. We all do, right? Not so much the women. So it's Vega Jane who's my strong female heroine, and she really is. And people who say, well, it must be easy to write for kids. I'm like, well, you need to get off of that, because it's actually the opposite. It's much harder to write for kids. Kids are so smart these days. They've seen everything, and how do you enthrall them? I'll give you an example. I mean, when I was, in high school, I went to see a movie you might remember. It's called Jaws. And Jaws, terrified me for the next 10 years of my life, such that not only did I never go in the ocean, I didn't bathe for 10 years. It was just, I was afraid the shark was going to come out of the pipe. And I still remember sitting in the theater and that head popping out of the porthole. Everybody in the theater, man, woman, child, they all wet their pants. I know I did. It was like the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen in my life. Horrifying. So fast forward, my kids are little. I come down one day, my daughter's holding the remote, and she stumbled on Jaws, the movie Jaws, and they're watching it. And I'm like doing the slow-mo down the stairs. I'm gonna throw myself in front of the television to stop them from being traumatized like I had been, until I noticed, one, that my 4-year-old son was on the floor laughing his butt off. My daughter, she's holding her remote going, that's the fakest, stupidest shark I've ever seen. So that's all you need to know about writing for kids. It's hard. Now, I've been really encouraged by the response from teens, getting a lot of fan mail from young readers. What I really love is they tell you exactly what they think. If they don't like something, boom, they go right to it. There's no tact involved at all. It's like, that was bad. Boy, you really need to work on that next time, okay? Just saying. Which is great. Now, even though Vega Jane debuted at #1 on the Times list, I'm still working hard on it. That's me in my office working hard on it. I'll tell you a really quick story about that. You see me? I look really cool. I had been out the night before celebrating somebody's birthday, and we decided that we should not drive home. So we stayed over. I slept in those clothes at my friend's house. I got up at 7 o'clock in the morning because I suddenly realized that Washingtonian magazine was coming to my office to do this photo shoot. So I went directly to my office, and I showed up, and I was like, you just want to shoot the office, right? And she was like, no, you're going to be in the picture. I was like, oh, give me a minute. So I go into the bathroom, I putting the cowlicks down, wiping the wrinkles off. So that's inside scoop on that. I slept in those clothes. But I'm still writing and writing and writing, and that's what I do. I love that part of it. Now, The Keeper comes out on September 8th. That's the visual there. There's a lot of action. This is sort of nonstop, and again, creating a whole new world with Vega Jane centered around it. It was just terrific. Sony, the movie studio, Sony acquired the movie rights for The Finisher. They're hard at work on the screenplay. I worked with the screenwriter doing the first draft. I met her at a restaurant in New York, and we sat in the back for like 4 hours going over notes and stuff, and the second draft has been done as well. Now, I would say that passion doesn't come along very often in life, particularly with what you do for a living. A lot of people, it's a job, and they get a paycheck, and they work hard, and they do get something out of what they do, but the passion comes from other parts of their life. It may be from their friends or family, something. So if you can find something you're passionate about in life for what you will do with your life, go for it. Don't second guess yourself and say, gee, I'm not really sure, because passion almost never comes around again a second time. It's almost like waiting to hit by lightning again. It's just not going to happen. So whatever it may be that you would like to do, writing or anything else, you just need to really go for it. I'm glad that I did. It took a long time, but you know what? Things that are worthwhile should take a long time, because at the end of the day, it'll mean much more to you. Now, I'm going to show you the book trailer for The Keeper that Scholastic did. You might see it when you watch the new Maze Runner movie or the last Mockingjay movie. So here is a first look at the trailer.
I did not come here to be safe. I came because it's better to fight and die than live as a coward. This is my last stand. Me, Vega Jane. I choose to fight.
From master storyteller David Baldacci comes Vega Jane in a story that takes you to the breaking point. Freedom begins with survival.
Thank you very much. Can I have this? I was just, the clicker. I'm really wedded to it right now, so I think I'll just walk off with it. We have a couple of minutes for questions. Anybody want to have any questions? Oh, yes.
So, I read the first book, The Finisher, and I'm wondering if, we know that there's Wormwood and the Quag, but we don't know where they are. Are they on a different planet? Are they someplace undiscovered? Where is Wormwood?
Okay. The question is, where is Wormwood? Is it planet Earth or just somewhere else? What would you like it to be?
I don't really know.
Yeah. It can be wherever you want it to be. It could be Earth. It could be a parallel universe. Sometimes, I always tell people that a book is never finished until the reader reads it, because I give you a template of what the story is in my mind, but there's a lot that's open to interpretation. So however you want to finish that off, however you want to think about this world, where it might be, is perfectly fine with me, because you have every right to do that. Anybody else? Yes. I've been to Fort Leavenworth. Yes, absolutely. I was not incarcerated there. I just... Yeah, no, I like to go to the places that I write about. One of the few I didn't, I wrote a book called The Target with Will Roby. Part of that took place in North Korea. I admit, I didn't go to North Korea. There was a snafu with my passport. Kim Jong-un said no, so I didn't go.
You showed a page of edited text, and I wondered if you had a particular favorite set of editors that work with your work, and do you like it when they're especially rough, or you like it because they try to help you get rid of some of those words.
The question is, do I like it especially rough? I'm so sorry, I forgot this was the Teens Pavilion. I don't normally do this age group. I apologize. Really, I hope my wife never hears about this. She's like, oh boy. The editors, I've had my adult editor, for probably the last 12 or 13 books. It's probably the best relationship I've had with an editor. We just really get each other, and it's worked great. And I've had other editors that have been okay. Some have been fine, some not so fine. So I appreciate the fact that he and I have a great relationship. Rachel Griffiths is my editor at Scholastic. She and I hit it off from day one. You wouldn't be able to find a more enthusiastic editor than Rachel. She's just been a powerhouse. I love her to death. But those relationships are really important, because not only is it someone you're talking with, and I do like it when they're hard on me, because they push me to make it better. I don't want them to tell me what's right with the book. I want them to tell me what's wrong with the book. My wife does, why wouldn't they, you know? So for me, that works really, really well. That's all the time we have. I'll see you guys at the book signing. Enjoy the rest of the festival.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.